Well, let me welcome everybody to the Alachua County Charter Review Commission regular meeting and third public hearing here on June the 9th, 2010. I ran into a friend the other day that said we were on TV more than the Seinfeld reruns, and so anyway, we are proud to have you here and appreciate you taking the time to come down here, and we'll comment more about that in just a few minutes. I was given a second. Rob will be back in just a second, but I think we can take care of our first business, and that is we distributed the minutes of the May 26th meeting. Hopefully all the members have had. Joe Little has moved approval. It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments on that? If not, those in favor of approving the minutes as distributed, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you so much. Our next item is, we'll go to in just a second, is comments by members. And I want to make a few comments tonight to start things off, if you'll indulge me for just a minute or two. But in just a few minutes, we will hold the third and final public hearing on all the proposals that have been submitted. And I wish to thank everyone for your participation, and I believe those who have been part of this process before will agree that the level of participation and citizen input has been far greater than in any previous charter reviews. We appreciate the hundreds of citizens that have participated in the process in one way or another, and we on the Commission thank each of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come here, to speak to us, to write to us, to email us. And I don't have a Twitter account, but some of you probably even tweeted to some of us. You can be sure each of us has given and will give thoughtful consideration to your comments. As we all know, the job of this commission, as stated in the charter, is to propose any amendments or revisions which may be advisable for placement on the general election ballot. This is the first phase of the process. After we complete our assignment, we hope there will be many opportunities to debate the issues, and that there will be forums and articles and editorials and op-ed pieces and radio and TV programs, and all will result in a good, healthy discussion about all the proposals. Then in the final analysis, the voters will make a decision about whether or not to make any changes to their county charter, and they will do that on November the 2nd. Recently, I read Buddy McKay's book, How Florida Happened. The book goes into great detail about the history of government reform in Florida since the 1960s, and is dedicated to Bill Sadowski. Mr. Sadowski was a former state representative and also former Secretary of Community Affairs during the Lawton Childs Buddy McKay administration. He tragically died in a crash of a state aircraft. In Governor McKay's book, he wrote, Sadowski was an example to all who served with him. As it happens, our legal counsel, Sarah Blakely, served with him and was on his staff and held him in very high regard, as I'm sure all Floridians do. But before his untimely death, Mr. Sadowski wrote some thoughts about being a participant in a democracy. Let me share a couple of those thoughts with you. He said, first, always respect another person's right to hold their own views, just as you want others to respect your right to hold independent views. Don't question people's motivation. Consider what they have to say on the merits. A good idea from a scoundrel is still a good idea. Remember, and I paraphrase here a little bit, that we are all merely citizens who, for a limited period of time, are granted a modest portion of government's power. Moreover, never forget that the people in their Constitution retained all political power to themselves. And lastly, he reminded us that we serve all the people. Keeping those thoughts in mind, over the next couple of weeks, each of us, in our own way, will make decisions about which proposals are advisable and which proposals should be going on the ballot. My own criteria may differ from yours. The elements I'm looking for are, does it promote accountability and transparency in government? Will it encourage greater citizen participation and involvement? And is it of widespread community interest? We may each reach a different conclusion based on the same set of facts, and that's okay. After all, if we all thought alike, they wouldn't need all 15 of us sitting up here. Finally, I've been asked to clarify how the next two meetings will move forward. Needless to say, I'm only one vote, and other than serving as the presiding officer, hold no more authority than any other member. However, unless the members direct me otherwise, I plan to follow the process used before. That is, in order to move the business of this commission along, once the public hearing has closed tonight, the time for citizen input will have come to an end, and further discussion will be limited to the commission for this evening. In other words, to our neighbors who have joined us here tonight. If you want to say something, the public hearing period is your time to say anything you wish, and we will keep the public hearing open as long as there are citizens wishing to speak. Then after you have spoken, it will be time for the commission to consider all that we have learned and go to work on some of the proposals. I say some of the proposals because we have one more meeting scheduled for June the 23rd. At that time, Professor Kenneth Wald will make a presentation on the pros and cons of single-member districts and broaden our understanding of the Voting Rights Act. Therefore, we will not vote on that matter tonight. I'm actually proposing that we put all the questions regarding the County Commission off until the 23rd so that we can consider those questions together all at one time. I do expect that the Commission will wish to take public testimony after Professor Wald's presentation at that special meeting. On the other proposals regarding citizen initiatives, charter amendments affecting municipalities, and nonpartisan election of constitutional officers, I think we will be ready after the public hearing tonight to hold final votes and dispose of those issues one way or the other. As a reminder, it takes 8 votes of this Commission to send any of the proposals or any one proposal to the voters. Let me just say again how much I appreciate everyone's participation and how hard the members of this Commission have worked to bring us to this point. I also thank you for your indulgence of these brief comments, and at this time I'm happy to recognize any other members that wish to make comments before we get started tonight. Any comments? Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say a couple of brief things since this is the last actual public hearing. Let me say first that I'm really honored that I was chosen to serve here, not only for the service to the people, which I believe is everyone's motivation up here, but I've been especially honored to serve with the distinguished members of this panel. It's been an interesting group, and I certainly echo all the things that our chairman said, and he deserves a lot of credit for how he has conducted this meeting. He's done an outstanding job, and we would not be anywhere near where we are without his leadership. And I would also like to just point out 2 things. One, we were all appointed by the current county commission, and I think sometimes there's been some feelings that maybe we are, and I can only speak for myself, directing thoughts we have towards our current county commission. I hope that's not the case, because this whatever we do or you citizens do will outlive anyone probably as far as their service on the current county commission. And I also said at the last meeting, I just want to kind of repeat it, I applaud the county commission for picking, in my view, such a diverse group of people. They could have picked just people they thought would just go along with whatever they thought, and we haven't had that much input from them, and I kind of appreciate that. And the last thing I would say is that to people, because I know there are some people that are passionate about both sides of any of these issues we're about to discuss and ultimately will vote on. And I just want to let you know that no matter what action we take here tonight or at our final meeting, whenever that is, the Charter Commission, in effect, will make no changes whatsoever. The only thing will come out of here is proposals. The people will ultimately decide, no matter what we put out of here, whether it has merit and is right for Alachua County. So at the end of the day, although we'll be talking a lot, and I've certainly done my share, that we won't actually do anything other than put forward proposals that you and your neighbors will ultimately decide, which is the way it should be. But I just want to say again how much I appreciate being here, and especially serving with the members and you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to work with all of you, truthfully. Any other comments? Mr. Grundy.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I echo the same sentiments Commissioner Martin also stated. But again, I do want to bring something, and when I'm finished reading this, I also probably will make a motion regarding this. Mr. Chairman, and it was brought to my attention by members or by some members in the audience at our last meeting that there were some actions and behaviors that were disturbing and inconsistent that I do wish to bring to your attention. We had citizens requested to address a particular matter, and you asked them to take their seats. and refused to recognize them. However, in the same meeting, you allowed another member of the public to address our body that was not properly recognized. In order for us to have better input in a more meaningful way, we should allow the public to address us, especially during a public hearing. We must cease and desist the notion of continuing business as usual. We should conduct public comment and inputs. A friendly suggestion, Mr. Chair, that I would probably give for allowing comments is that we should allow comments once a motion is made. It would allow for us to allow the public to actually address a specific matter that this body or the dais has taken action on, and would probably also help to move the meeting in a more pragmatic and meaningful way. And I guess, Mr. Chair, is that we allow that all of the public should have an equitable amount and dignified amount of time to address the body. And I think that's a concern that I had, and that was shared with me, and I wanted to share with you.
Appreciate those comments.
And that's
Anything
my motion.
else? All right.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that, Mr. Chair, that rather than continuing like last meeting, that we establish a rule that once we take action on a particular piece of item, we allow public input on that motion or on that piece of action. That's going to be my motion.
Outside of the public hearing you're talking about.
Correct.
Okay, you hear the motion. Any second?
Second.
Mr. Martin has seconded the motion. As I understand it, is earlier tonight I said that at the conclusion of the public comments, public hearing comments, that we would close public comments and then it would be up to this body then to take up a discussion about it. What you're saying is even at that point, as I understand the motion, that we should continue to allow public input, and that's the way I understand your motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The reason why, basically, as the like the county commission, when a particular piece of action or a motion is made, the public may want to still address that particular matter, and I'm just following maybe the procedures to allow for more public input, because maybe someone came in later, or maybe someone comes in and wants to address a matter. That's why.
We certainly, I hope everyone would agree that during the public hearing comments that we certainly were as lenient and open to everyone that wanted to speak to us. DJ. Mm-hmm. Okay. There we go.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember what situation Commissioner Grundy is referring to, because I don't remember that particular situation.
I know that after we closed public hearing last meeting and we took up the single member district, we didn't recognize any further citizens, and I think that's the comment.
Okay.
Okay?
I guess it was the situation with Commissioner Coward.
Right. And he had spoken. Yeah, he had spoken in the public comments area. Okay. Further discussion of this motion, Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean if you have, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I do have a follow-up because, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but I thought we kind of did that anyway. If we're making a motion, citizens can comment on that motion.
Right. We've done that up until the public hearing part, when we figured everyone had had their say, and then with 15 members trying to move things along. At that point, we didn't, but we can certainly do that. We've always tried to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're correct. You're absolutely correct.
Mr. Chairman, can I just get a clarification from the maker of the motion so I understand?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying, Mr. Grundy, that similar to like the county commission, that if someone moves a motion forward and it's seconded and the commission discusses it, that before the actual vote is taken, the chair would then say, is there any discussion from the public on this motion? And if none, if some happens, they recognize them. If none happens, then they proceed to the vote? Is that
That's
what
correct.
you're proposing?
That's correct. Because I want to make sure we're giving as adequate amount of input from the public as allowed, especially during the public hearing. And that's all I want to make sure that we're allowing for.
The public hearing is not a problem. We're talking about after the public hearing now.
Especially when a piece of action, or we take action.
Right. I understand what you're saying. But that'll be after the public hearing. Okay. I understand.
The only thing that I would say to that is, it's one thing, I think, if we like, for instance, and I'm not going to use any examples, but if you take one of these ballot initiatives as it is right now, and the public discusses it, and then someone moves to pass that as it is, then in that sense, discussion has already been done. But if someone, which could happen, makes some type of proposed amendment to it or something like that, then in a sense that opens up potentially a whole new line of discussion, and I certainly would see the merit to having someone be able to comment on something that's new, if that makes sense.
And there may be those amendments, and I appreciate that. That helps me understand his.
That's my thought on it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think, and I could be remembering this inaccurately, but I think that's the situation that Commissioner Grundy is referring to. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think the specific situation was there was a question posed by Commissioner Little, and although I don't directly remember the chair directing someone to sit down, but I do remember noticing some indecision in the crowd, as if the crowd did not know, or the audience rather, did not know what the rules were and that they could not address that. So I think this is good as a kind of a bright line rule, so the public can know when is it within the bounds to make comment on a particular issue.
Right, well,
and I think the situation that Commissioner Grundy is describing, it goes in line with what Commissioner Martin was saying. There was a question posed that may have put a new twist on the issue, and I think there were several audience members who wanted to comment on that.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. I can assure you I never ask anybody to sit down. But anyway, that's a different matter. Any other comments on this? I think we all understand the question, and I think from my own standpoint, John Martin helped clarify that if we're not dealing with just strictly what's already been proposed, if an amendment or something comes up, there could be discussion that would be relevant. Ashley.
Ask that we follow the same rules so that we have 3 minutes for comments.
Okay.
Beyond that, and that we allow people to speak one time, and that way there'll be some order to all of this.
Are you making a friendly amendment? Because I'll accept it.
Well, I think we just simply say we follow the same
Yeah.
guidelines.
That's
Okay.
fine.
All right. Everybody agrees to that then?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion on Mr. Grundy's motion then, that we, even after public hearing, that we are open to public comments, which we're certainly happy to do. Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Whoop, excuse me, are there any public comments about this particular? I'm learning.
If I had a trap,
Seeing no one rise on this comment, yes. Please come forward and introduce yourself, if you would, so we can get you on the TV here. Yeah, I got in trouble for not recognizing, but somebody just standing up out there too, so just come on
I
forward.
did want to just clarify, my name is Susan Baird. You did mention to come forward just once. Now, if you come forward once during the public hearing, and then if there's a proposal...
Per question, we'll say.
Good, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. And then at that point, can you come up again, or is it just once per evening?
No, per question. Each question will
Great.
stand independent. We'll be glad to see you each time.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay? Per issue, right, per issue. Any further comments? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote then. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
Ooh, here we go.
Where is our roll? Yeah. All righty. This is Mary, our official vote tallier. We'll run through this real. You'll call the roll. Announce the results.
Mr. Ackerman? No. Mr. Brinkman? Aye. Ms. Ferguson? Yes. Mr. Glazer? Mr. Grundy? Mr. Irby?
Yes.
Mr. Little? No. Mr. A. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. J. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Stringfellow?
He's absent tonight.
Oh. Mr. Tuttle?
No.
Mrs. Martin?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tuttle, what was your vote?
No.
Sorry. Oh.
And while you're tallying the votes, Mr. Stringfeller sent word that he was called out of town on a family issue. I'm not sure what it was, but
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
And Mr. York?
No.
There are 5 noes. The yeses have it.
okay. The motion is agreed to, then that's how we will conduct ourselves. And I want to thank Rob Brinkman for agreeing to be our timekeeper tonight. They're only do that. That's right. We'll try to work with you on that. Okay. Any further comments tonight by the members before we recognize legal counsel? Seeing none, let me introduce Sarah Blakely to everyone. Sarah has been our legal counsel, and she has some comments and bring us up to date on where we are in this process, and then we'll move forward to the public hearing right after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This PowerPoint contains the ballot language for each of the 8 questions that's currently before you. I'm going to briefly go through them. We've been through them before, but it's important for the public hearing purpose to do that. Also, I'm going to make comments more specifically about the opinion letters that I've written that you have in your package this week. This question 1 is a citizens initiative petition requirement for ordinances. Currently, the charter provides a process that allows citizens to petition the county to adopt an ordinance by a citizens initiative process. It requires, after the citizens' petitions are approved, it goes to the ballot and the voters get a chance to vote on it. The current process, the question changes the percentage of electors required to sign petitions in order for it to qualify for the ballot. Currently, it's 7. Now it's changed to 5. The amendment, if it's approved by the voters, takes effect immediately after the election. So the next cycle will be changed from 7 to 5. That's it in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman.
Number 2.
On with 2. This section also, question 2, also affects the citizens initiative petition to amend or repeal ordinances. Currently, the charter provides a prohibition against the Board of County Commissioners from repealing or amending a citizens initiative approved ordinance for 1 year. This proposal, question 2, extends that from 1 year to 5 years, but provides from the 2nd year through the 5th year, the Board of County Commissioners with a supermajority vote, I think that's what it is, has the ability to amend it so that if something were to happen in the meantime and everyone should recognize it's a mistake, that the Board of County Commissioners for the 2nd through the 5th year would have the opportunity to amend that. That's question number 2.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Martin, you recognize?
These 2 questions would seem to be, in a sense, tied together, but in fact, they're really not, right? In a sense, you could say yes on one and no to the other, and they're not. In other words, this one here, if it were to pass and the first one were not, it would just mean that the process is still 7%, but if that 7% is met and passed, it would now be governed under this if this passes. They're really independent, right?
That's absolutely correct. These 2 are totally standalone questions. One can pass and the other one can fail.
Thank you.
That is a good question because that's unlike some of the other amendments that we have before us. But that's correct on this question.
Thank you.
Number 3.
Question 3. I've got the little rev title there. That means revised and not a reference to religion. This is the question, the city-county dual vote requirement. And it has been revised since the last time we met a little bit to clarify some of the language, and I'll go into that. If the voters approve this amendment in November, the charter will be revised to require that future charter amendments affecting city powers will not be effective within the cities whose voters don't approve the charter amendment. The proposed amendment provides exceptions for future amendments that specifically state that the charter amendment is going to be countywide. It also provides an exception for any amendments specifically authorized by law, either by special act or general law of the legislature. I've had numerous discussions on this question with Beth Rollins from the League of Cities, and she's had some suggestions, and some of which I've incorporated in here, most of which substantively I have not. The first suggestion that she had that is incorporated in here was to change the reference to regulatory. If you'll recall, the current Constitution provides for a dual vote on certain matters. The courts have said those matters are services. When you're transferring services between and among local governments, the Constitution requires a dual vote unless the statutes say otherwise, and there are some that do that. And then for everything that's not in the service category, the Supreme Court has said those are regulatory matters, and that a charter can provide for countywide power of the county without regard to what the city voters actually say if it passes in the charter amendment. So last time I had distinguished services from regulatory and said that when the charter amendment relates to regulatory matters, then it won't have countywide effect if one of the city's voters disapprove it. In talking with Ms. Rollins, it seemed a better approach to specifically reference the constitutional provision to say that matters that don't require a dual vote under Article 8, Section 4 will be governed by this amendment. And so that's what I did. The reason for that is that case law ebbs and flows sometimes, does ebb and flow, not just sometimes, but does. And so that seemed to be a better approach, and so that's what we've done. As to the other issues I haven't incorporated, I will let Ms. Rollins talk about those. So in a nutshell, that's what question 3 and the resolution does.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask a
Pause for
clarifying question.
please.
I'm sorry, I'm just got a little bit lost there. So you're saying by referencing the Constitution that this question 3, that charter amendment would only apply to regulatory powers, and that cities would be able to opt out of regulatory powers in all cases, or only?
No.
Okay. In other words, if the charter amendment still specifically says that it applies countywide.
It would apply countywide. All the exceptions that were in my original language from last time that you all adopted are still in here. The only difference was really technical, to change the term regulatory to a specific reference to the statute, the Constitution.
Okay. I know this will probably be a matter of discussion when we get to it, but anyway, I appreciate that y'all have all worked together, and I think we've given unprecedented access to you, to the cities, because they are elected representatives of the people of Alachua County, and we appreciate you working with them. I do think, at least I was told anyway, that the ballot language, we need to delete 4 more words to make that fit, but we can get all, I think it's over the 75 limit. But anyway, we can solve all that later on, but I just was, the other thing, I appreciate you clarifying the way you explained it.
Well, I did learn today that computers can't always count. So we, on the phone today, we actually counted the words, and I think this should be 74 words, but,
Okay. Well, good. I know you're aware of that, but anyway, I just was...
I changed it a little bit to incorporate or delete some words, mostly the word
Gradually, as we get down to the nitty-gritty later tonight, in 2 weeks from tonight, we'll certainly ask that you be given the authority to make any technical or conforming adjustments to make sure everything's legal and fits together nicely. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question 4. This question unlocks the ability of the charter to do the next couple of questions. This question proposes to, this is not the exact language, replace the Board of County Commissioners with the Board of Charter Commissioners. Let's see. Okay, I've got a revised one on this too. Should be in your package. Replaces the Board of County Commissioners with a Board of Charter Commissioners. In listening to you all talk and in understanding what your issues were, you had a lot of issues related to the election of the Board of County Commissioners that you wanted to pursue, at least tentatively, and the Constitution for a Board of County Commissioners requires that those processes be established by law, will be as provided by law. So you didn't have much room there to do things like nonpartisan and other type single-member districts, perhaps, and some other issues. So this concept, the charter commissioner concept, is designed to allow the charter to be amended either now or in the future to make those types of changes, primarily in the election area, that citizens may want to ultimately approve. And that's what this does. It replaces the Board of County Commissioners with a Board of Charter Commissioners. This replacement, and I've found a better word here, this replacement will take, we hope, will take out from the provision in the Constitution that requires the legislature to govern it and allow the charter to govern it more directly.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Martin.
I do have a few questions about this. If we could back up a little bit. Originally, you had opined that it would not be constitutional for this charter commission to set any sort of new procedures or determine or allow a county charter to determine whether or not a county commissioner can be elected on a nonpartisan basis. And I believe the argument would be, or the concern was, the last section of Article 8, Section 1E, which says one commissioner residing in each district shall be elected as provided by law. All right. And
It's the entire section. I don't think you can read that sentence in isolation. It was the point of my opinion letter.
okay. But if we change them to charter commissioners, then that takes it out of the prohibition in the Constitution.
That's my view, yes.
And the reason you can do that is the language that says except when otherwise provided by county charter.
Correct.
All right. I was reading a case that you cited earlier, which was I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, which is the Grassi case, William Grassi, in which part of it cites their ballot language for that amendment, which says provided, and the amendment language was, provides that county commissioners shall be elected as provided by law, thereby removing the constitutional restriction that county commissioners must be elected at large by the electors of the county, and allows the Board of County Commission to be composed of either 5 or 7 members. It seems to me when interpreting a provision of the Constitution, you kind of got to look towards the intent of that amendment or that provision. And I guess the first thing you got to look is at the plain language.
Right. I
All
agree
right.
with that.
And from reading Section E, it says, except when otherwise provided by county charter. Then you can, these provisions of 5 members or serving staggered terms and elected as provided by law. Correct me if I'm wrong, is that where once you use that, invoke that language, except as provided by charter, is that what gives you the authority to come up with charter commissioners?
Yes.
All right. If you follow that reasoning, would it say that once we say the charter can change by calling the names, does that mean that we wouldn't have to have districts of equal population or contiguous territory? Can the charter say, okay, all of a sudden, since we have charter commissioners, we don't have to have districts that are of equal population?
This constitutional provision would not apply, the one that we're talking about.
Right.
Article 8, Section 1E.
But the one
Other provisions of federal law would certainly apply. But the
So
answer to your
by-
question is that, no, this will not apply at all.
But if you look at the ballot language of the original amendment, all it refers to is whether or not you can elect a commissioner from a single-member district, and whether or not a commission needs to be either 5 or 7 members. To get rid of all those other provisions, wouldn't that kind of be contrary to the intent of what was expressed in the ballot language?
Well, the ballot language that you're talking about that was in State versus Grassi was an amendment to this provision. So that this provision existed prior to then.
Right.
And that was what Grassi had a problem with.
Right, but all that amendment deals with, and they specific outlines that, look, we're going to allow this, the purpose of this amendment is to provide county commissioners shall be elected as provided by law instead of electors, as it said earlier, and that.
Instead of at large.
Well, I think
They were at large.
yeah, one
required to be at
commissioner
large.
residing in each district shall be elected by the electors of a county.
Right.
So
that's
elected at large. So the ballot amendment says that the Board of County Commissioners to be elected as provided by law.
Right.
So it no longer mandates that you have to be elected at large.
Correct.
All right. And
Unless the law provided that.
all right. And it also indicated that the commissioners could be composed of either 5 or 7 members. All right. It didn't seem to say anything else but those two things. So it seems like the intent of that amendment was to allow you to elect commissioners at large, and if you wanted to by charter, have either 5 or 7 members of commission or some other number.
As long as it's provided by law. I'm not sure where you're going, so I'm not.
Well, the question is, in my mind, we are going forward with saying that the whole idea of charter commissioner is somehow constitutional, and I don't know if that's would be accurate. Ordinarily, if something is spelled out as being, it says it right there. Similar to in subsection D, in which it outlines Article 8, Section 1D. It says that you can get it outlines the charter officers, the county officers, the tax collector, sheriff, property appraiser, clerk of court, and it specifically says if you want to elect them any other way you want to, you can do that. And then it says you can transfer the powers to any other charter officer you want. It spells it out clearly. In this section, it doesn't say anything. That section didn't say anything about county commissioners. Section E doesn't say anything about county commissioners. And it seems like we're kind of grafting that, except when otherwise provided by charter, that something that's not specifically spelled out in the Constitution, we kind of assuming that you can do that. That's my point. Because we go back to the plain meaning of the words, plain language, and I don't see that here.
Well, lawyers
Chair.
disagree all the time. I guess my point is that, except when otherwise provided by county charter, gives you the authority to do this different type of governing body.
And I think you made a valid point when you said case law ebbs and flows, and lawyers disagree. And my concern is that we make a decision that sets us up for litigation on something that we hadn't really thought about whether or not it's a good idea in the first place.
If, just from a layman's standpoint, you two lawyers here are arguing, but if the Constitution didn't intend for there to be, where it said, except as otherwise provided, the governing body shall be the Board of County Commissioners, if there wasn't some other body anticipated to be provided for, it doesn't seem to me they would have written that in there.
Well, and here's what I'm going at. We're kind of speculating. I'm saying we don't have to speculate. We can look at the ballot language. And the ballot language refers to not some other body. It refers to the Board of County Commissioners, and it specifically says this amendment provides for changing from elected at large to single member districts, if you so to speak, and changing from either where it's mandated 5 or 7 to a number that can be provided by charter. And I'm saying that's what's spelled out there.
That's what that is what the amendment spelled out. But prior to that amendment, there was language already in the Constitution.
But if it's amended, that's what we're dealing with, right?
Well, yes, I'm just saying that you can't take that amendment in isolation. That amendment in isolation said if you've got a Board of County Commissioners, you can have 5 or 7 members, and if you have a Board of County Commissioners, you can elect them well, you can elect them as provided by law. And then the law was changed to provide for single-member districts in a certain process.
And those are the only changes.
Yeah.
That doesn't get it partisan and all the other stuff.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Brinkman.
if I may,
Please.
if you're done, I think I have similar concerns to you, Commissioner Martin. It seems to me that when we create this charter commission with this question and with subsequent questions which depend on it, we're really just replacing one name, county, with another name, charter, and suddenly we're ignoring all manner of constitutional provisions. And kind of my question is, where would that stop? I mean, currently, the county is limited as to what sales taxes it can levy, what gas taxes it can levy. But if we're calling it a charter commission, we can just ignore, as provided by law, it would seem to me, and the county can do whatever it wants. I mean, I don't really, it seems to me that it is constitutionally suspect, except for the specific provisions in state law for single-member districts or 5 or 7 commissioners, because they clearly intended to allow the option for charter counties to change that. But I don't think they intended to make any number of other changes applicable, or available to charter counties. It seems to me we're just changing a name. It's as if we decided to change the name of certain types of cars to some other name so that we can go any speed we want in those vehicles just because we've changed the name. I am very uncomfortable with this idea of creating a charter commissioner just so that we can change the rules that everybody else plays under.
No. I think Mr. Grimley had his light. Okay, Mr. Little, he's said I can recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe some of the members here, at least one of the members sitting to my left, are mixing apples and oranges. This provision has to do only with the structure of county government, not the powers of county government. It doesn't change the powers of county government, only the structure, how it's governed. And that is what the proposal deals with. And I just want to make that point.
Thank you, sir.
Well,
Mr. Martin.
well, and I think that's what the amendment provides for, the structure, but it kind of talks about the structure as, well, you can do 5 or 7 or 10 or 11 or whatever if you want to do by charter. That's what the amendment says. And it also referencing whether or not the county commissioners can be elected at large. So if that means structure, then I would agree with you, but I think it's limited.
Okay. Further comments at this time? If not, I'll ask Ms. Blakely to move right along.
This question 5 is contingent upon question 4 passing. So if the voters don't approve question 4, question 5's votes don't count. I guess they were actually counted, but they don't mean that question 5 passes. Question 5 provides for the nonpartisan election of the Board of County Commissioners. It follows, like I said, the path of this charter commissioner concept laid out by question 4. The issue of House Bill 131 was raised, I think, by me last time, and the effect that it might have on the nonpartisan election of the Board of County Commissioners. House Bill 131 has a provision in it that says all matters of under the election code are preempted to the state. It also has another sentence in there that allows for municipal elections to be conducted under a provision of the election code. That provision of the election code provides that a municipal charter can determine matters that are not inconsistent with, that don't directly conflict with the other provisions of the election code. Many municipalities have nonpartisan elections under that provision. There is a body of case law in Florida on county powers. And what the courts have consistently held is that the provision in the Constitution, Article 8, Section 1G on county charters, provides that charter counties shall have all powers of local self-government. The courts have construed that term, local self-government, all powers of local self-government, to include municipal powers. The courts under that body of law have approved taxes authorized to municipalities for charter counties and other types of powers that are specifically authorized to municipalities only by the statute. The courts have said that unless there's an indication in the statute that the power doesn't apply to a county, if it's a municipal power, it does apply to a charter county. So under that concept, and relying on that second sentence in House Bill 131, Section 1, it's reasonable to conclude that because cities can have nonpartisan elections in their charter, so can charter counties. In a nutshell, that's my update on my analysis of 131.
And in fact, Ms. Blakely, our charter begins by saying that Alachua County shall, however, have all county and municipal powers of self-government granted now or in the future by the Constitution and laws of the state of Florida. So tying those two together once again.
And it specifically says the term municipal power. Right.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Mr. Martin has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In previous discussions, one of the reasons why we had, I think it's these numbers keep changing, but I think number 4, which you just discussed, one of the reasons was some members had said they would like to see nonpartisan elections, and part of the reasoning for 4 was that it would give you the ability. Am I hearing you saying now that it actually, this particular issue could stand alone as it is now, or it would have to be tied in with 4? Because it sounded to me, and like you were saying, and I don't by no means putting words in your mouth, that it's currently the county currently has the ability to change the charter for this issue outside of 4. Is that incorrect? Did I misunderstand what you were saying?
Yes, you misunderstood what I was saying. I like to be specific,
Yeah,
yes or no with you,
Yeah,
when I get the opportunity.
I like it.
I know you do. I know you do.
I don't mind yes or no and then expanding. That's what my whole point. Go ahead.
The provision in the Constitution on county commissioners says that they shall be elected as provided by law. That means that you've got to find a law that deals with county commissioner elections, and when you look for that law, you will see that they are partisan elections. So it's my view to get around that, or to find a way to maneuver to allow for nonpartisan elections, you're going to have to abolish the county commissioners or replace them with this separate entity under the charter and not directly under this constitutional provision.
Aren't there currently several counties that already have nonpartisan county commission elections?
Yes, Volusia is a very good example of that. They have a county council.
I'm not asking you to list all of those things, but how did they do that?
Because they're not a board of county commissioners, they're a county council.
So because they were different, in that case, county council, in this case, charter commissioners or officers, however it's labeled, they did a similar type thing, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can't address every one of them.
I'm just asking. But basically, there was some similar or some type of action that allowed them to go back to the language you talked about previously, unless otherwise provided by, and they took some type of action that created that, either from the legislature, like maybe Dade County, or through Volusia with their council members.
Council. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you. I wasn't quite clear on that. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I'm a little unclear on this because my experience was in this county several years ago, we passed some campaign finance restrictions. We lowered the the maximum amount of contribution down to $250, and we changed a lot of the reporting requirements for candidate campaigns. And in order to do that for the county, we had to go to the legislature and get a special act of the legislature, and then we had to pass a ballot referendum, a charter referendum, if you will. Yet, when the city of Gainesville enacted those very same provisions, it did so merely by ordinance. Now, I can understand how that occurs because the city of Gainesville had the municipal exception. But I'm a little bit uncertain how we can do that here. In other words, I'm just not really there with this idea of why didn't we have that power when we were passing campaign finance reform? We were a charter county at the time. Why didn't we have this ability to just pass campaign finance reform by a charter amendment without having to go to the legislature? Because it took a couple of tries before we could get it through the legislature.
I'd have to look at exactly what you're talking about in the statute and analyze that. I will say that the provision on municipal elections in the Constitution is a little bit different. It's an interesting provision. It says each municipal legislative body shall be elective. I don't know if that's like a course that you can take or not take. I don't know if that, I haven't looked up that word. I should, because I ponder over it every time. So perhaps because their language is a little bit different, and perhaps there's not a preemption, I'm not sure. And I haven't jumped into that legal issue. I have heard that other counties have adopted something similar to what you all did by special act and then charter amendment. But there's a lot of doubt about its lawfulness.
Yeah, I think some have been challenged, too.
Well, I'm thinking the county I live in, Leon County, I think we have it on the ballot this next November.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Little,
may
please.
I speak briefly to that?
Yes.
The reason that this county, in fact, got a special act is because the election financing laws require that the financing provisions be in accordance with law, and law includes a special law, and the Alachua County got a special law and then amended the charter in respect to that special law. So that was the reason it was done.
So you're relying on, if I may ask, you're relying on this provision in Section 1E that says shall be elected as provided by law. County commissioners shall be elected as provided by law?
This was not an election provision. This was a campaign financing provision.
Okay.
So it's independent of this.
Okay. Appreciate that clarification.
Mr. Chair? I'm struggling with some of this in that there's an exception placed in the statute for municipal elections. And from looking at the term municipal, city, elections, and I think I follow you about power, but let's presume that the counties had that power. And the legislator decided that, well, we want to, in light of a Florida Supreme Court case, we want to assert our authority over the election process. So we're going to vote explicit preemption. So assuming that the power existed at one point, wouldn't this statute say, well, no, we want to take that back and we preempt this area of law except for city elections? And is it the term as it normally is construed or looked at, not necessarily what you're talking about, the power, but just the very simple definition of what a city is versus what a county is? Because I'm looking at it and I'm wondering if we go with the definition of, or looking at municipal powers, well, what did this statute preempt? Who exactly was this statute aimed at if it's not preempting counties? What body would be preempted? And please don't take this as a I know it's starting to seem like, and I know that's why people hate lawyers, because we kind of go back and forth, back and forth. This is just a question I have in my mind. So this, and I'm just asking it because I'm just not seeing it. It's one.
You're talking to another lawyer. I like it. So it's not
I
bothering
know
me.
I see the eyes kind of glazing over out there. This is kind of why.
The election code that is preempted is probably 150 pages. It deals with all kinds of things relating to the supervisors of elections and the counting of ballots. And as you will recall, the impetus for this language being put in here was the Browning case. And the Browning case out of Sarasota County, there was a charter amendment that attempted to require different types of audits and different types of process for counting ballots and keeping up with ballots and different procedures. And so that was the impetus of that. Cities don't have that same, they're not supervisors of elections. They don't have that same kind of power. So when the exception for municipalities was made, the holding of the Browning case is still undone by the preemption that is in the rest of those statutes. I don't know if that helps.
Well, yeah, not a whole lot, but thank you.
Okay.
One thing I would just say to the commissioners that we've on the county commission thing, I'm proposing that we, other than the public hearing tonight, that anyone can address it, that we'll actually take those matters up in 2 weeks. And so it gives us 2 more weeks to put more questions to Ms. Blakely and try to clarify any of these things also. So we won't actually vote on that question tonight. That's my intention.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I said on that because if I had a preference, I would take as many things off the table. I mean, by
Okay.
dealing with the vote tonight rather than 2 weeks from tonight.
So you want to vote on it?
Okay. We have
My
not.
preference. I'm
Okay.
ready to vote on a
All
lot
right.
of things. At least
Okay.
I will be after I hear what the
Okay, well, that may only, as Mr. Little said, that may only leave the single-member district issue for next time, but we'll,
Well, it depends.
whatever we want to do.
decide, but I'd like to, if we could wait until we've heard the discussion of the crowd here, of the audience.
Right.
And then have a motion on the floor, let the audience speak to it if it wishes to, and then decide how we're going to vote.
Okay.
That'd be my proposal. So-
Mr. Chair, one more clarifying question regarding House Bill 131, which it's actually now something else, but, and Commissioner Martin's question, wouldn't that have only applied now to counties which are not charter counties? And because if it doesn't apply to municipalities and it doesn't apply to charter counties, his question was, who does it apply to? Would it apply to regular counties that aren't charter counties, the other 47? And would it apply to school board elections, et cetera?
One at a time, okay?
Okay.
It's a curveball, school boards. The election procedures, like I said, we're talking about 150 pages worth of law. The exception for municipalities is a provision in that code that says if you're a city and you've got a different method of election in your charter, I'm paraphrasing here, if you have a different method of election in your charter, as long as it doesn't directly conflict with the other provisions, it will prevail. It's okay. So when the legislature preempted all matters, it made an exception for municipal charters. That would include nonpartisan. And again, because charter counties have all power of local self-government, they also have that same power as specified in the exception to the preemption.
So it would apply, then that statute does apply to the other 47 counties that are not charter counties?
As far as nonpartisan?
Yes. And all matters pertaining to elections?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a pretty broad
So,
question. But
and I bring up school boards only because the school boards have come up here before. You know, people have raised issues about superintendents, et cetera. So, I mean, school boards are like a completely separate animal from counties and cities both, are they? You know, in elections, aren't they?
they do have their own provision in the Constitution, yes.
They have their own Election law, Chapter 105, I think, covers them. Okay, let's move on to number 6.
Number 6 is also contingent upon the Charter Commissioner question 4 passing. It provides, currently the salaries of county commissioners are set as provided in the charter. They are legislatively set based on population factors. Question 6 would propose a change to that and would direct that the salaries of the Board of County Commissioners, the Board of Charter Commissioners, to be set by ordinance by the county commissioners, charter commissioners. I'm going to have to get used to that, too. The charter commissioners. And so an ordinance process is a public hearing, there's an advertisement in the newspaper, a public hearing, and everyone is invited to come and attend, and so that's the process that this envisions.
Appreciate it. Mr. Grundy has a question.
So, okay, so that's only set once the previous ballot question is passed for abolishing the county commission and establishing a charter commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Martin.
Pass the paperwork. If this were to pass, obviously contingent on the other issue, would it require the county commission at the time this passed, what would happen to the salaries they currently have? Would they be set at that amount until they took action, or would they be required to take action setting the salaries, whether they stayed the same, up, down, or whatever, within a reasonable time after this passed, or would it be the next time a salary change they would have to do it?
Well,
How would this actually apply if it were passed, I guess is what I'm saying.
it would take effect the date that they take the oath of office, and the new folks take the oath of office on November 16th. And so they would, at some point, yes, I would think that some point after they take office, they were going to have to pass an ordinance because it's required.
It would be required, so, in other words, they couldn't just stay at the same salary unless they actually took a vote, or they would have to take some action one way or another addressing the salary issue.
They'd have to adopt an ordinance. They could stay at the same salary, they could increase their salary, they could lower their salary, but they have to do that by ordinance, which, again, is a process that's prescribed in the statutes that you have to have a public hearing and notice in the newspaper.
Under the current, it's the guy that writes checks to pay these people. I can tell you, under the current charter, they're required to pass an ordinance, but the ordinance says that the salary shall be the same as for other non-charter counties. And so I would think that would be in place until a new ordinance was passed, and because that ordinance is already on the books.
I guess that's what I'm kind of asking, would it take, do they have to take that action every year or every election?
Right now, the way this is...
Do they have to reaffirm it, what I'm saying?
Right. It's not in this, we haven't written it that way. We could write it that way, but it has not been written that way.
So
Right.
if I'm, and I know I respect Mr. Irby, but he's not a lawyer. You might have played one on TV, right?
That's right.
But,
But he does write the checks. So.
That's
right. So, I mean, I appreciate his understanding of it, but if I'm hearing what he is saying, then if no further action were taken even after this were passed, that it would continue to be in effect the same as it is now and would be raised, lowered, or whatever based on what other charter counties are from now forward? I mean, if they never took another vote, then in effect this would have no effect.
Well,
Is that what I'm...
I think that would be a transition. I would certainly say to the commission, and I think their attorney would, that there's now a new, if this should pass, that there's now a new charter that requires you pass an ordinance. They need to get that in their proposals and get it moving and adopt an ordinance that addresses charter commissioners rather than county commissioners. And so that would be, I think they would be required to address it. But there's has got to be some transition period in there.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just, and I'm not
right. I understand.
saying, I don't even really know how I'm voting on this one, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I would hate to see something, if it in fact passed and were passed,
Right.
really have no effect because, I mean, that's my only question.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure this really matters because it's a practical matter. The objection that citizens appear to have to the current system is that the county commission constantly just says we have no ability to affect our salaries. At this point, they will no longer have that fallback, and they could ignore it forever, but I'm guessing they won't get elected forever. So, I mean, I think this is self-limiting.
Appreciate that very
Most
much.
likely,
Mr.
correct.
Thank you. Okay. Other
just wanted
comments
to be
on this one? If not, we'll move to number 7.
Revised question 7 requires the constitutional officers to be elected in a nonpartisan election. Back in January, I opined based on a court case by the Supreme Court, an opinion by the Supreme Court, considering the issue of term limits for constitutional officers, that said that in order to impose a term limit on a constitutional officers, the offices had to be abolished and replaced. And the court was relying on the language concerning county officers that says, or any county office may be abolished when all of the duties of the office are transferred to another office. The court focused on something called a disqualification. They decided that a term limit, you can only serve 2 terms in concession, was a disqualification, and the only power to limit constitutional officers to term limits was by abolishing them, and perhaps by abolishing them, but you couldn't do it unless you, maybe you could do them if you abolished them, but you certainly couldn't do it if you hadn't abolished them. In reconsidering the issue of nonpartisan election generally, and thinking, rereading those cases and talking to other people since I issued that opinion in January, and rereading the Constitution numerous times, it seems to me that I too much relied on that Cook opinion that dealt with term limits and the abolition, and didn't focus on the language that says the electors of the county shall elect the constitutional officers except when provided by county charter or special law approved by vote of the by the electors of the county. Any county officer may be chosen in another manner specified therein. To me, that, in just rethinking the question, being the ever vigilant lawyer that I am, it seems to me that that language, and rereading the case law nonpartisan, that language allows constitutional officers to be elected in another manner. That's what it says, in another manner. And another manner would include nonpartisan elections. So I'm suggesting a revision to question 7, and instead of abolishing the constitutional officers and making them charter officers, I would suggest just a simple amendment and say that the offices of sheriff, property appraiser, tax collector, clerk of the court, and supervisor of electors be elected by vote of the electors in a nonpartisan election instead of a partisan one. So it's a much simpler, cleaner way that at this point I feel very comfortable with.
There's a number of counties that have it just that way now, am I correct? Okay.
Correct.
Mr. Grundy?
I'll actually make a motion and follow that recommendation. I make that motion, I would do that.
The motion.
We're still a wordsmith now, so whatever she proposes is going to be what we
Okay.
start with, so I think we're okay on that. Okay. All right. Any other comments on that? Number 8.
Number 8.
And again, this will, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Could you push your button there?
Thought I had. So by modifying the language as it currently is, requiring constitutional officers, you don't have as much flexibility with this language as with if you abolish the constitutional officers and replace them with charter officers, you will have more flexibility in terms of if some future charter review commission or citizen initiative want to make some changes to the constitutional officers structure, it would be easier to do it with the old language than with this new language, correct?
It would be easier if they were charter officers, yes, because then, under the rationale of the Cook case out of Jacksonville, you could propose term limits.
Right.
On the other hand, if a future charter commission would want to, they could, in one single amendment, abolish those officers, transfer the duties to some other entities even, and to subject those newly revised charter officers, subject them to term limits.
Okay.
So you could do that in a single amendment if you wanted to.
Okay. Number 8.
Question 8. Single-member districts for county commissioners. This is not contingent on number 4 passing. It provides for a charter member that proposes single-member districts and the election of county commissioners in those districts by the electors residing in those districts only, and has the caveat with no more than 3 districts extending to the county line. At the last meeting, I was asked to look into the lawfulness of this question, that in the direction that no more than 3 districts can extend to the county line. I wrote a letter to you all on that issue, and to back up a little bit, my rationale for saying that you had the authority to do that was that the Board of County Commissioners has to take whatever actions you have and put them on the ballot by a resolution. And the statutory provision authorizing the Board of County Commissioners to do that is also by resolution. So I've kind of made a link there and said you all can force them to do a resolution, and this could be the resolution. And looking back at the actual language in the statute, it is very specific and says it shall be a particular question that doesn't include any language like with not more than 3 extending to the county line. So it's my view that if you all want to do, you've got a couple choices. One is to take out that language with no more than 3 districts extended to the county line, or go to include this in the charter commissioner idea, because then you could propose single-member districts without having to rely on the Board of County Commissioner action to do that, and therefore the statute, and you would be freed up from that statutory prescription.
Then under that one, it would take the voters agreeing to what we call number 4, I think, changing the county commissioner charter, and then also passing the second one, where if we delete those words, then it would stand on its own.
Correct.
Okay. We need to keep that in mind, those of you that are thinking about that. Okay. All right. Anything else we need to know before we open it up and hear from our people?
One procedural question.
Mr. Martin.
At what point would it be appropriate to, if someone wanted to change that or propose an amendment to change it to be, like our attorney just said, essentially taking that to the county line language out, at what time would it be appropriate to do that if someone was so inclined?
Right after the public hearing, we'll open it up for new business, and then, as Mr. Little indicated that earlier, we'll ask the commission exactly how you'd like to proceed, and we'll take up the items one by one. And but a motion would be in order at that time. Minus single-member district. I think we're all in agreement. That's got to go next time. Okay.
Right, but the question
you could work on the wording.
The wording
Yes,
as far
right.
as that, as opposed to
Absolutely.
actually proposing to
Right.
pass it or not, but the wording itself.
That's right.
That's a separate
Separate
issue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Blakely. We appreciate very much your comments. I think that everybody here recognizes how hard these decisions are and how much thought is being put into them, and we appreciate you leading that discussion. Mr. Grundy.
Mr. Chair, for sure on the 23rd, as Mr. Wald said, that he will be able to appear on the 23rd?
He will be here.
Okay.
He is out of the, I don't want to say that. Anyway, he will be here. All right. Seeing no further hands up, at this time we will call the public hearing, the third public hearing that's required by our charter on proposals. At this time, we're going to call that public hearing to order. For those of you that have turned in cards so I can keep you in order, we've got those. If you haven't signed a card and you want to speak, or if after you hear others speak they're not covering your point and you want to sign a card, we're going to take them in the order that we've received them up here. And I'm going to ask Mr. Brinkman there to operate our time, and so when you see the little light there go to yellow and then red, we'd appreciate very much if you conclude your remarks so that everyone here will have an opportunity to speak this evening. But our first speaker tonight we'll recognize, and I hope I'm saying this right, is Frank Fiordalis. Please come forward and introduce yourself to us and say what you'd like.
Thank you. Frank Fiordalisi. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your diligence in pursuing this mission. I know I've contacted several of you and been responded to, and particularly Mr. Brinkman, appreciate his attention to my concerns. I would like to say that this slate should be placed on the ballot. I think that all of these things are extremely important. I am particularly strongly in favor of 4 and 5 and 8. I think that the most important part of your endeavor is to give the people the opportunity to say what they feel about these things. And I'm sure that they appreciate the fact that you are sitting here to present an opportunity to people rather than denying an opportunity. So I hope that all of these proposals go forward, and I thank you.
And we thank you for those comments, certainly do. Mayor Richard Sutherly. From. Okay, we'll do that. All right. John Schiffenwaller? Schiffenmiller, I'm sorry. We've got to get some better ink
Thank you,
pens
Mr.
up there
Chairman.
for you.
I want you to know that we were selected this evening specifically for the difficulty in pronouncing our last name.
So far, we're off to a good start. I tell you.
My name is John Schiffermuller. I'm a longtime resident of Gainesville and the surrounding area. My wife and I have lived in Archer for about the last 15 years. I'd like to talk about the issue of single-member districts. First of all, single-member districts, what are they? It means that the people who live in a district are the only people who get to vote for who's going to represent us. That's probably one of the most basic ideas of a democracy, is that we get one vote per person, everybody gets to vote, and nobody else gets to make that vote for us. The limits on campaign contributions that were passed a few years ago put a big crimp in who can run for county commission. You're running in 5 different districts. You've got limited funds to do so. People of modest means who can't afford to contribute a large amount of their own money to a campaign are limited in what they can afford to spend to run a campaign. If they have to campaign in the entire county, they have to concentrate their campaign where they can get the most votes, and that means the city of Gainesville. I looked at some of the past elections in District 1, and I noted that except for 2004, where the candidate ran unopposed, the district rejected the winner in both the 2000 and 2008 election. The people that live in the district that the candidate is supposed to be representing didn't want him to represent him. The city of Gainesville did. The city of Gainesville has their own commissioners. We'd like somebody to speak for us, and that's only fair. I know the board is closely divided on this issue. If I had the power to elect other people's representatives, I'd probably want to keep that myself, but that's not a democracy. Democracy is we get to pick people to represent us, not that we get to pick somebody to represent other people. The mandate of this board is to determine which issues will be passed on to the people for their vote, not to make the decision for us. I ask that this measure be placed on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you for taking time to come tonight.
Mr. Martin, I enjoyed the case law versus construction starting.
All right. Okay. Well, you'll have to come back next week then, or in 2 weeks from now. Wally Grant. Mr. Grant, please come forward.
I'm Wally Grant, lifelong resident of Gainesville, own and operate a business in Gainesville that's been here since 1952. I live in a little town called Melrose that I'm very proud of. First of all, I'd like to thank you, commissioners, for serving. I know it's a lot of hard work. The pay's really good, kind of like owning your own business in Gainesville. But I appreciate all the time you guys are putting in. I particularly like to speak on the single-member districts. I live in Melrose. We don't have a municipality. We don't have a sheriff. We don't have Barney. We have a volunteer fire. We share the services of Alachua County. But what we don't share is representation. And I know when I ran for county commission in 2000, the rural areas told me the most that they felt like it didn't matter to them if they voted because the city of Gainesville is who put their electors in place. And as I see the apathy of the voters now not coming forth, what can we do to encourage more people to participate? If we gave them a commissioner from their district that had to answer to them, and he had to campaign and find out the issues of that district, I think that district would be better served. And I think folks like myself that live in Melrose would really enjoy meeting our candidates, helping them, taking them door to door, and homing up our commissioner as opposed to, well, who do we have in our seat now that has never been to Melrose their whole life? Thank you.
Appreciate that very much, Mr. Grant. Appreciate you coming tonight. Margaret Epps. Margaret, former county commissioner, we're glad to have you with us tonight. Welcome.
I'm Margaret Epps, and I served on the county commission from 92 to 96. Thank you all for serving on this charter review commission. We appreciate your diligence and the time you give and your expertise. I want to speak in favor of the system we have now. In other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The county commissioners have to serve from a district in which they live, and this is to prevent 2 or more commissioners from serving the same part of the county. But then they are elected by all the qualified voters of the county instead of just the people that live in their district. And I have a hard time thinking that it's more democratic to limit the districts to the people that live in the district instead of representing the whole county. When I was on the commission, I felt like I did represent the whole county, and I did go to the smaller towns and meet with the people. So I think this is something we ought to keep and not change it. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down, Commissioner. Mr. Don Marsh. Don? Welcome.
Don Marsh, owner of Marsh Window Cleaning and serial candidate. I am speaking about single-member districts. Even though I live in the city of Gainesville, I suppose I am working against my own best interest to say I'm in favor of single-member districts because I think it's just right. It's only fair. Now, I took out a district map recently. I don't know how many people realize this, but it is possible for the county commissioners, all 5 county commissioners, to live on 34th Street. Because it just is. I don't see how you're really representing these districts. The districts are truly a facade because there's no meaning to them. You're elected county-wide. You can live on 34th Street, all 5 of them, and be serving lawfully. And, of course, I understand that some people sometimes rent a place where they need to serve. It has happened in the past. So, you know, I don't really think that it is a terribly sincere argument to say that you are representing that district. So therefore, districts really have no meaning. You might as well abolish them and just say we're going to take 5 county commissioners no matter where they live. Now, the first meeting that I came to, the second thing I want to speak to, a lot was made about how this would have some disparate impact on minorities. Now, in 2002, I was the opponent of an African-American woman who will go nameless, and I was absolutely throttled. And I want you to know that if I got any sort of preferential treatment because I was a white male, I want to go on the record saying I do not ever want that treatment again. I believe that the people of this county are well able, morally, to make a good decision about this thing. So please, would you please put this on the ballot so that the voters can choose, because that is what we're supposed to do. And if they feel that it is against their own best interest to do that, well, then they'll vote it down. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming tonight, Mr. Marsh. Jackie Benefield. Mr. Benefield. Miss Benefield.
My name is Jackie Benefield, and I thank you all for the work that you are doing. It's obvious to me sitting out there that it's a lot of work, and I appreciate what you're doing. I want to quote Thomas Jefferson. You guys may recognize this. Wherever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. Now, you might be familiar with that because it's on your website. That is what I'm asking you for. I'm not really going to, I don't really want to debate the merits of the nonpartisan, but I do want to say that you, Chairman Irby, said that you want, one of your goals is to get people involved. I believe the nonpartisan elections will do that. I believe the single-member districts will do that. I live in the county. I'm a third-generation county resident. And when I talk to the people who live on my dirt road, they don't feel that they have any need to vote in the county election because they say it's another Gainesville city commission because the people are elected from Gainesville. I think that Commissioner Martin said that the Charter Commission will make no changes. Well, the Charter Commission is making changes by what it allows or does not allow on the ballot. And I do believe the people can be trusted. I think they should be presented with the information. Many, many people, when I looked at what the purpose of this review body was, I did not see anything that said the purpose of this review body is to maintain the status quo. It said it was to look at things and see what should be brought up to be voted on. You've been asked by multiple people through various means to please allow us to vote on nonpartisan. And I realize the ballot language is difficult. I realize that I mean, maybe it is impossible, but it seems that we should at least, that I would ask you guys to do your best to find a way to let us do that and to find a way for us to vote in single-member districts. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that very much, Ms. Bennett. No, okay, thank you so much. Cleve Sharp. Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Cleve Sharp. Been living in Gainesville all my life, born here. We've been struggling with single-member districting for approximately 20 years, to my knowledge. And this is about the closest we're going to ever get to putting a single-member districting on the ballot. Now, some speakers in the past have said that even the NAACP did not approve of single-member districting. Got court cases here about the fact that the court's cases said differently. Now, the only thing that we are asking is to put single-member districting on the ballot to let the people of Alachua Wake County decide whether they want single-member districting or keep the status quo. Now, you can take a look at East Gainesville under at-large and see the progress that East Gainesville has accomplished in the lifetime that I've been in Alachua Wake County. It's a different world in East Gainesville than it is in West Gainesville. And we need to change this. And all I'm asking, I don't want to be redundant with the other speakers who've already said they approved of single-member districting being put on the ballot. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you taking time to come see us tonight, Mr. Sharp. Ron Thornton. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much, and do appreciate all the work that you're doing. I am one that got interested in this whole process of districting because I've been stewing over this issue of representation for several years. I live out west of Jonesville, out in the woods, on a dirt road, and pay a lot of taxes. And I drew the conclusion, based on study and talking to all the commissioners, that it really didn't make any difference what I thought about things, that they had a strategy for taking this county in a particular direction, and it did not include providing what I consider adequate services throughout the county. And as far as I'm concerned, if a resident lives right on the edge of the county line, they deserve just as much service as somebody that lives in a metropolitan area. And so, given all of that, I concluded that single-member districts was one of the key things that might be a possible solution. And I wrote all of you an email several weeks ago with my focus being on services, because that's really why I'm interested. I'm not. You have to understand the demographics is what it is. My political philosophy is far opposite from what the general view is in this community, but that's not the issue for me. And race is not the issue for me. But I do think we need roads. And I do think there's a whole list of those things that we deserve for all the taxes that we pay. And just briefly, a couple examples we can learn. I have worked literally all over the South and have had the opportunity to see other counties and cities, etc. For example, in Tennessee, the county where I'm from, we have an elected road commissioner. And believe you me, that person pays attention to the electors or to the voters. In Floyd County, Georgia, where I went to school, Rome, Georgia, every house or every piece of property that's sold must face on a paved road. That's all instilled in the county philosophy of how to do business. We don't have that here. And I think that if we can focus on how we can get more services for our citizens, all these things that have been proposed, I think, have merit. And I'll close by saying the issue of the county line, the proposal I submitted to you had a little numerical analysis of some past voting history of county commissions. And I looked at the demographics, and I looked at the way the districts were cut or set up. And I believe that with single-member districts, given that you have a lot of guidelines you have to comply with in setting up whatever new district setup there is, that the issue of race is not going to be an issue. But I do believe that if you use the county line issue of no more than 3 districts or going to the county line, that you're going to wind up with the same situation that you have right now. Because that really is going to mandate that the districts be drawn to include heavy concentration on Gainesville. So I just offer that as something. If you go back and look at my numbers, it clearly shows that in any election, there's a built-in 10% bias for any candidate that has run in the past two elections. Gainesville offers a 10% bias in the election that is very difficult to overcome if you're going countywide. So we'd appreciate all of these proposals for your consideration to vote for them.
Appreciate your time tonight, sir. Appreciate you coming in. Susan Botcher. She left? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
we gave you a sheet that a group of us needed to speak right behind each other.
Okay, is that the
It
yellow
was-
sheet? It's
It was
coming
the
up.
Charter Review Amendment Community Coalition. They were a group of organizations, and I listed all of our names on it.
Okay, I think that's the sheet right here.
No, it's not yellow. It's on one of the white sheets. It says
Okay.
Charter Review Amendment Community Coalition.
I'll be watching for it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. John Reiskine. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So they're not all on one sheet. Okay. All right. I'm with you then. I've got him on a separate sheet though. Is he on? John, are you on two sheets? That's right. Which you want to speak now or later? Okay. All right. All right. Is Evelyn Fox in that group also? Okay. All right. How about Joyce Dorval? Dorval. Appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm here for two purposes. I am here to speak on behalf of the Gainesville-Alachua County Association of Realtors. I am the current president. We have approximately 900 members, and we have already submitted our support for questions 4 through 8 on your charter review. We have quite a diverse organization, and I believe that these issues, as well as our membership, should go forward. On the other side, I'd like to speak myself as a 25-year resident of Alachua County and a taxpayer, and I think that you should not be making a decision which items need to go on the ballot. You should be putting all of the items on the ballot and let the voters and the residents make the decisions that need to be made for their best interests. Thank you.
Appreciate your time very much. Roz Miller. Ms. Miller? Please come forward and tell us what you think.
I'm Roz Miller. For our nation to survive as a constitutional republic, it is important that we become involved, and we appreciate your service for that, for being involved in your positions. As a third-generation member of Alachua County, I'm very interested in what goes on in this area because my roots are deep here. You've put forth a lot of really good, interesting subjects. They have created much interest, much discussion, and I think it's important that all of these issues be moved forward so that the citizens of this county can vote on them because they would be living under whatever is passed. Also, whatever you move forward, it's important that you make this available to the citizens so they can know what's going on before they go to the ballot box to vote. They need to know either through print or through broadcast about the issues, and that is something that you need to address. Thank you.
We appreciate that very much. Appreciate your comments tonight. Rick Nesbitt.
I believe he's here.
Okay, we'll set him aside then. I think it's Brady. I'm having trouble reading this. B-R-A-T-Y, I believe it is. B-A-T-Y, that sounds good. Come forward, please, sir. Introduce yourself to us. Welcome, Mr. Beatty.
My name is Jim Beatty. I've been a resident of Gainesville for approximately 28 years. Prior to that, I grew up in a county that had single-member districts, and it worked very well for us. I really appreciate your commissioner's service to this Review Commission. It's a lot of work, and we all realize it. I come in support of single-member districts for the following reasons. many persons in Alachua County feel left out of the election process due to the City of Gainesville residents tending to dominate these elections. All persons in Alachua County should have a voice in our election process, which single-member districts will allow. Single-member districts allow persons representing them to be more accountable to their constituents and more in touch. Single-member districts will allow for more participation by citizens in running for office and will be less expensive to run for office. It has been said that this will limit minority participation in the election process, and minorities will be less likely to win elections in Alachua County. Well, what about those in outlying areas that have been underrepresented in our county? We all deserve a voice in our county government. It's my understanding that the mission of this commission is to listen to the public and determine if an issue warrants putting it on the ballot from the amount of interest and discussion it generates, not your personal feelings about how our county should operate. I feel that all of you should put aside any ideological views you may have against this issue and put the issue on the ballot in November. Now, last week we observed Memorial Day here and honored men and women who have served our country and made the supreme sacrifice of their lives for those of us in this country to be able to determine the direction of our government in a peaceful manner through the election process. To not allow this issue to be put forward on the ballot and allow our citizens a chance to determine their governmental direction would be a disservice to their sacrifices and memory. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your time, Mr. Beatty. Mr. Travis, Larry Travis from High Springs. All right. Thank you, sir. Rod Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez?
I was going to defer until next week, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that very much. I have a sheet here with four names on it, and I don't know if this is part of the group that was wanting to speak all at one time or not. But Michael Bowie, Dr. Bowie, do you want to be with that group whenever we? All right, y'all. Okay. Is that? Okay, we're almost there. I think we're there now because Dion was next, and are you part of that also? Okay. All right. Well, what I'm going to do then is next is Charter Review Community Coalition. So we need to speak as a group. And so are you okay? Come forward and introduce yourself to us, and we'll give each of you 3 minutes or as you wish, and we'll go from there.
Well, good evening again, Mr. Chair, and to all of you serving on, I know, such a hard-working board. I am Diane McGraw, and I am here on behalf of the Alachua County Charter Review Coalition, and we have a presentation, and you'll hear different speakers this evening. Also, I can give you a copy. You should have received this by email. If you have not,
okay, we appreciate that very much. I guess one copy.
And if we can put the slides up if we need to.
Yes, please do. There's slides.
I don't know how to.
Put it in the box.
Yeah, this is just one copy here.
And just to share with you who the members of the Alachua County Review Amendment Coalition, you have the African American Accountability Alliance, known as the 4As, the Alachua County MLK Commission of Florida, the Alachua County Ministerial Alliance, the Democratic Executive Committee, NAACP, and the Visionaries. And we're just going to share our views this evening on two amendments, the abolishing the county commission and the single member district. And first, we just want to start off with some history as far as the Alachua County Board of County Commissioners' historical record. It's one of diverse representation of women, African Americans or minorities, and rural representation. Previous women that have served: Phyllis Bly West, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, Jane Walker, Levita Brown, and all of these people were elected from rural and at large. Penny Wheat, Paula Delaney, and Margaret Epps, who spoke to you earlier. People who have served from the rural area Sidney Martin, Bobby Summers, Kate Barnes, Chuck Clemens, Shelley Downs, and Mike Byerly. Minorities, Tom Coward, Charles Chestnut III, Rodney J. Long, and Cynthia Chestnut. And at this time, we're going to have Evelyn, who will come forth and continue as our next speaker in the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Evelyn Fox. I'm the Vice Chair of the Alachua County Democratic Executive Committee, as well as the Vice President of the Alachua County branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. To Mr. Chair and members of the Charter Review Commission, my question to you is, are you willing to be an architect of the process that takes away every citizen's right in the county to vote for their commissioners by trading the option to vote for one commissioner? Studies have proven in single-member districts that accountability is lessened by the creation of special interests for a specific district by those who are serving that district. Collaboration is substantially reduced, and corporate efforts among elected officials are additionally reduced. In other words, why should citizens give up 5 votes for one? We want all commissioners to be accountable. Right now, all citizens have an opportunity to vote for all 5 commissioners. We have not heard any concrete, factual comments as to how going from 5 votes to 1 would benefit all citizens of Alachua County. As I close, I would like for each of you commissioners to search your hearts before you vote on this drastic change that would affect the civil rights of citizens of Alachua County. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
And next, we'll have Sally to come forth and present. Susan Botcher had to leave, and she'll come and present that information.
Okay.
I guess John is going to come.
Okay. Dr. Riskin, come on forward then.
John Riskin, and chair the Democratic Executive Committee of this county. The 2 issues I want to take up, Susan couldn't be here. She was not feeling well. She wanted to bring up, what we want to mention is certain issues that are the consequences of single-member districts that I want you all to consider, and if it's on the ballot, for the citizens of this county to consider. One of them is the risk of gerrymandering and who decides the districts. We're presently in a statewide consideration of Fair Districts Florida, which establishes criteria for establishing the makeup of these of the new districts. And in this case, with 5 or 7 members, that would have to be done again. The change to single-member districts could potentially result in a political gerrymander, which has been a real problem in this country. California and Iowa being the only other states so far that have had rational criteria. So the concern is that maintaining a one-person, one-vote principle and having proper representation of all citizens in the county. Now I'm going to get to my remarks because I know them. The other issue is accountability. It's a major issue in single-member districts, and it is the accountability of county government and that of each of the county commissioners. Don't put any slide up. To whom are they accountable? Will they be accountable to every citizen in the county, or if we have single-member districts, to only those in their districts? And I will agree that it's much cheaper to run in a single district than county-wide, and that's an argument that I can't counter. But what I am concerned is the potential divisiveness of single-member districts in the governance of our county, and the possible parochialism and the attention to the commissioner's own district would lead to excessive pork barrel politics. As a recent letter in the Gainesville Sun from a citizen of Palm Beach County who has experienced single-member districts well stated, the only good thing about single-member districts is that they benefit the candidates. They only have to campaign in one district and basically could care less for problems in other districts. Now, of course, we hope every commissioner cares about the county as a whole. Now, we have 9 municipalities in our county, 8 of which, that's excluding Gainesville, total a population of about 20,000. These are in the rural areas. Each of these municipalities has their own city commission, where many matters of the quality of life are addressed by its elected city commission. 125,000 of the county's 230,000 citizens live in the city of Gainesville, and one of the problems in this whole situation is too many people live in Gainesville. You look at that, and Gainesville is the dominant city here, any way you cut it. Those in the unincorporated areas depend solely on the county commission for their government. They include such rural areas, and if I leave you out, I apologize, such as Evanston, part of Melrose, Grove Park, Monteoka, Rochelle, Windsor, Fairbanks, Island Grove, Orange Heights, Lochloosa, Jonesville. They all deserve representation. Each of them, with a single-member district, would have the say in electing just one commissioner every 4 years, thus in effect disenfranchising 80% of the voters in the county. So that's really my concern. The question, as presented in the distribution, the diversity we've had in the county commission points out that we have had rural representation on many of the past commissions. Under single-member districts.
Dr. Eskin, could I just pause just a second? I won't take away your time. I understand what we're trying to do is group the time so you can make a proper presentation. I just want to make sure that Rob and I are on the same page. That
Yeah, he actually got, I started his light late, actually, because of
and
so I will wrap this up.
Because really and truly what you're trying, I'm counting the speakers here, and what we're trying to do is, like you're our fourth speaker, so it's 12 minutes, 15 minutes for, and I don't know how many more speakers are coming, but that's it right here? Okay, all right. If you'll start the time, I think
Okay,
we're
she
close,
will
and I don't
wrap
want
it
to
up.
seem
I understand
like I'm not doing it. I
perfectly.
appreciate that very
Yeah.
much. I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you'll start it again there,
All we need, we need a county commission, every member of which considers the needs of all its citizens, not just those in his or her district. Only by voting at large for all our commissioners can we be assured of that. The single-member district actually might feel good, but and it's satisfying to have your own district, but you would be excluded from the choosing of the other 4 county commissioners, and I think that would be a real disadvantage. I urge you to reject the advancing of this proposal for single-member districts as unwise and risky, but if it is on the ballot, the same arguments I've made will be made again. Personally, I want to. I have already previously indicated my indication that there are no nonpartisan elections. If that is a matter for consideration before you in the future, thank you very much.
we appreciate that very much. Thank you so much. Dr. Bowie? Okay.
Good evening. First of all, I know that many times individuals have come before you and talked about the NAACP and their last response to an issue around single-member districts. Well, if you're concerned about those issues, the NAACP meeting is the 4th Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock p.m. at the Wilhelmina Johnson Center. We have a different opinion on single-member districts that in reference to Alachua County. So if you have questions about that, I represent the Alachua County branch of the NAACP, Dr. Michael Bowie. You can definitely make it to the NAACP meetings, bring up your opinion in reference to that, we listen to you, and I come forth with the opinions of the membership of the NAACP. The Alachua County branch of the NAACP continues to oppose single-member districts because of its impact on minority communities. Some may say that the NAACP is bringing up the race card. Well, the truth of the matter is that the NAACP, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, is about making sure that all citizens are a part of this democratic process as determined in our Constitution and bylaws of the United States of America. People who live outside of the city of Gainesville want representation. True political parties want representation, and people of color, which represents more than 1/5 of the population, want representation. Currently, no one can tell me how the lines will be drawn to split the county into 5 districts. I know that today I can go to all 5 commissioners and meet with them about issues affecting the low socioeconomic and minority communities of Alachua County. I know that I play a role through selecting individuals that have people like me as part of their concern. Do I always get what I want? No. But my vote is counted, and hopefully the person that I did elect will listen to me. And if I did not elect them, I'm hoping that they will listen to me as well. If not, they will see me again when the time comes for the ballot. In single-member districts, where I must admit, at the city level, due to the structure of Gainesville, we may make more sense out of what is going on. Even though I question sometimes what is going on in the city of Gainesville, because now in the single-member district, we only have 1 of 7 individuals that are representing a certain community that I represent in this area. Oftentimes, when they bring issues to the table, they only represent 1 of 7. If you go with the single-member district, you only have the representation of 1 of 5. If you vote for all of the candidates, then you have the ability to communicate with all the candidates and stress the importance of how you feel about various issues that come before you. Personally, I wish I could have a wand and we could have enough funds to fund all of the things that are here in Alachua County. I don't think that decisions on how funds should be divvied up in in this county, should be based on numbers, but on need. The municipalities have been talking about their needs that are here. But I also know that there are needs of people from low socioeconomic and minority communities that have not been met. And so at this particular time, until some other strategy, some other type of development has come forth, the NAACP cannot support single-member districts because we do not believe that single-member districts will help solve the issues of Alachua County. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowie. Appreciate you coming down. Appreciate everybody sort of paying attention to the light up there. We're trying to be fair to everyone here, and appreciate that. Are there further speakers? Okay. Is it Beth Rollins? No, I see. That's another group here, I think. Okay. I don't know what this yellow sheet is then. Okay. Does that conclude the presentation of those that wanted to be in order? Am I right there? Okay. We appreciate that. Appreciate all the thoughtful remarks.
No.
All right. Jack Carter. Mr. Carter, please come forward. Appreciate you being here.
Good evening. I come before this board because I have a problem with what you're trying to do. The problem, as I said, if you're going to do single-member districting, that what you're going to end up having a chairman of the board who's only selected by one slice of the pie. So I cannot support it myself as the way it's designed. I think you need to have at least 1 at-large or 2 at-large preferable, so that those particular people, if this thing is passed, that they will say that, well, hey, I can go to at least 2 or 3 and get my particular issue resolved. I'm complex. What bothered me is I can remember when we was in Gainesville and they were talking about single-member districting. And now it seems like the tides have changed to the other side. And some of the people who elected on the board or some on this particular, who represent this, the county, were the same one that were elected through single-member districting in the city of Gainesville. Now they're against single-member districting at the county level, which is complex with me. I also agree with the president of the NAACP when he basically said, how can you pass something when you haven't showed the voters how it's going to look at the end? In other words, no one knows, or I have not seen, what single-member districting would look like. I have never seen the lines. I see part of it says that only 3 can go to the end of the county. But how can you ask us to vote for something and we don't know what it's going to look like? That's just like voting for health care. You don't even know what's in it. I mean, that's, to me, it's crazy. Okay, the other particular thing that I agree with, that's what my questions I have about single-member districting. I go along with term limitation because it seems like people are here forever and ever. And no new ideas are coming forward the board, get the same old, and people you come forward the board and they say, oh yeah, that's him, say your 5 minutes and they're gone. You don't have new ideas. I also support nonpartisan. As a person who worked for the federal government due to the Hatch Act, if I wanted to run for city commission, I couldn't do it because it's partisan politics. So I agree with the 2 term limitation and nonpartisan, but the part about single-member districting, I think y'all need to work on that a little bit more before y'all present it to the voters. Thank you.
Appreciate so much coming, Mr. Carter. Christopher Dillard. Mr. Dillard?
Thank you so much for the time and your energy and effort in trying to solve this very complex issue. I'm a resident in Jonesville, technically zip-coded for Newberry. One specific issue that hits me straight off the bat is coming out of GRU. We have a 25% surcharge on our wastewater that comes in and out for a matter of 250 to 300 feet. If the current political process stays as it is, what type of representation can we in the county have to put pressure on GRU to come to more agreeable rates? The residents within the city already elect their own commission. What we're asking for in the county is what the city of Gainesville was so enlightened in 1976 to come forward with, which was their own single-member voting districts. Where is the real disenfranchisement here? That's what troubles me. What we are talking about here, each and every one of you have been charged with the duty to act on behalf of all the members or all the voters within this county. We're talking about placing this upon the ballot. You are not making an executive decision as to whether this will or will not be law. You are the filter that is bringing it before the constituents of this county. And I implore each and every one of you to put aside your personal differences that you may have with either a D or an R and do the right thing for all the citizens within this county. What say do I have within the City Commission of Gainesville that seems to be a funnel giving us our county commissioners? And I hope that you will very seriously consider the impacts if you choose not to put this before the constituents of the county. You're taking it upon yourselves at that time if you vote no and saying that you know better than the citizens within this county. I hope that none of us are so presumptuous to think that we know what our neighbors can, cannot, will not do. I implore you to serve as a just and unbiased filter and help us to put this forward to the ballot so that we can continue this process that is American democracy. What we have right now are people that are absolutely disconnected from their government, and there's a microcosm here within Alachua County. The people within the county are disconnected from not only the city, but the county commission because they can completely troll the city and get all the votes they need. And I thought it was one person, one vote. How greedy it would be to have one person, 5 votes. And what accountability can we possibly have if we do not have a single member that represents our district that can bring forward the problems that we may have within that. I hope that you will give this the due consideration it so richly deserves, and that you will check any and all baggage before we vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you please restrain the audience from applauding, because it is.
If they want to applaud, let them applaud.
Excuse me.
All right.
Excuse me. Florida law requires that the chair of any public meeting conduct the meeting in an atmosphere which is conducive to the expression of opinions by anyone present. And if you're in the minority of the people, if you're in the minority of those being applauded, you are therefore constrained. You don't feel free to express your opinion. That's why the law requires it. And I'm only asking the chair to comply with that law.
We appreciate those comments. We appreciate all the comments tonight. You're really giving us some great food for thought. And it would be best, really, if we restrain ourselves, and that way everyone would feel free and unencumbered to come forward. So we'd appreciate that very much. Let's recognize Ian Ulrich. Mr. Ulrich. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commission. For the record, my name is Ivan Ulrich, and I'm president of the Builders Association of North Central Florida. We represent over 600 member companies. And once again, I'll stand up and say the same things that I've said at previous meetings, that we are in favor of nonpartisan elections and single-member districts. All the people that have come before me have done an excellent job of supporting those positions, and I don't need to go through all that again. But I would encourage you to take up, just like the last speaker before me, who was a tough act to follow, was very good. But just take the issue, let the issue go to the voters. I think that's all that we're really asking, and I think that's the charge of this board. You've seen the contentious and the back and forth, and it's a very hot topic, and I think it deserves to go to the voters and let the voters decide how they want to move forward on these issues. And I think that's the charge of this board, and I'd encourage you to let these issues, all of them, as a matter of fact, go get voted on. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Ivan. Appreciate you coming forward. Randy Elrod. Glad to have you with us tonight. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Randy Alrad. I have a little bit of a public speaking phobia, so if I pass out here, it'll be just kind of a normal thing for me.
We're all neighbors. Don't worry about it. Glad to have you.
Well, I'm here to actually present some facts. A lot of people have been here to present feelings, and they think about something, and they feel one way or another, but I'm actually providing you with with documentation of facts. These facts were, you wanted researched facts. Well, here's some facts. These are from the Supervisor of Elections office. This is public record, so it's stuff that's available to you. This is over 1,000 people who didn't get to vote because the elections are partisan. So these are people who are Green Party, No Party, Libertarians, Independents. You want to know who's disenfranchised? It's all those people who can't vote because they are not of a party that is either Democratic or Republican. So I'm here to say that, we need to make our elections nonpartisan so that we have fair elections and that everybody can vote. How can we help people out of the process in our local election when our commissioners don't give all of our citizens the right to vote? So I really would love for you guys to consider that it's so important to make our elections nonpartisan, and I'm also for single districting.
Single districting.
There we go. Hello. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming. Jim Drum. Manager Drum.
Mr. Chair, I've been awaiting
go with the other members of the Alachua League. I can't.
Okay. I've got Commissioner Travis, Mayor Southerly, and you. Is there? Do y'all still wish to speak, or how did you want me to? I'll treat you like I did the other group, sort of combine their time.
We were of the understanding that you were going to take some level of public comment after particular proposals were moved forward.
Okay. You just want to wait on that time.
We'll defer to that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it very much, Mr. Grundy.
Ms. Elred, I had a question for you. I'm sorry. You said you got this from the Supervisor of Elections, and 1,000, was this based in a particular, what geographic area? I'm trying to understand this better. I have just 1,000 folks, and that's it? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right.
If we included the entire county, then that would more than double.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. For those, since she wasn't at a microphone, the answer was, the list she provided us was electors from the city of Gainesville. Okay. Holly Shima. Did I say that right? All right. Come forward, please.
Hi. I just wanted to talk about the single-member districts as well as I forget the name of your group, but the group of people that came up here earlier. They were talking about how this was going to be such a drastic change. I don't understand how it is a drastic change. All you're simply doing is putting it on the ballot for other people to be able to vote for. You're not really changing anything. You're just giving people a choice in how their community is run. And they also said that Mike Byerly was voted rurally. I'm sorry, but I think he's like the least rural person that I know. He's completely dedicated to the city, and I don't see how he supports anything rural. The single-member districts is also each commission or each district or county commissioner is supposed to represent that district, not necessarily the entire county. Yes, they should have the entire county's well-being in view, but their job is to support that district that they were voted for and represent the needs of that person more so than, like, Newberry's commissioner should represent Newberry and not care so much about what's happening over on the east side of Gainesville. They should care, but their main focus should be on Newberry. Does that make sense?
Go ahead.
No. And they were also saying that it would be anarchy, or I think somebody said it would throw the government out of board or something. I don't know. But if the city commission can be single-member districts, I don't see how that's going to have such a drastic change and why it would be such a bad thing for the county.
Okay.
Thank you.
We appreciate you taking time to come down tonight. Brian Harrington. Brian, please come forward and introduce yourself to us.
Good evening. My name is Brian Harrington. I represent the Business Community Coalition, which is a group collected of the Gainesville Area Chamber of Commerce, the Gainesville Association of Realtors, and the Builders Association of North Central Florida. I'm here tonight to reiterate a lot of the same points that have been made. Hopefully I can phrase it a little differently. As of May 4th, 2010, the Supervisor of Elections Office had on their website, which is public record, there's 150,309 registered voters in Alachua County. Before us sit 14 with one absent, 15 members of the Charter Review Commission appointed by 5 duly elected representatives of the County Commission. 15 is 1/100th of 1% of the registered voters in the Alachua County. There's a lot of passion on both sides of the issues under consideration by the Charter Review Commission, including the members of the Charter Review Commission themselves. Let's take all of these issues to the ballot, which, by the way, your attorney is charged with helping you craft defensible language and language that can go on those ballots.
I don't think your time is right there. I don't think we reset it. So,
I started it when he started speaking.
Okay. Something to.
Go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll give you another minute and a half or so.
I'll get in trouble.
All right, we got you on the clock.
Anyway, your attorney is charged with helping craft the ballot language so that it is defensible. And so, as it was stated before, you act as a filter. And I think we should let this passion manifest itself in record turnout and participation in the civic process come this November if we can put all these items on the ballot for consideration and not have 1/100th of 1% of registered voters in Alachua County vote on these issues on our behalf. And I've also heard on a separate topic a lot of comment about the status quo. There's nothing wrong with the status quo. Well, if the status quo were okay, then tonight we'd all be speaking with British accents. So I'd like you to think about that. Good evening.
We appreciate that. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate you coming tonight. Stafford Jones. Mr. Jones, come forward. Tell us what you think.
Excuse me for being a mess tonight. I've been stomping around in the weeds for a client today. But listen, I've heard a lot of comments. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, I'd like to give you a specific example of how the current setup is broken. In Alachua County, we have developed, and we couldn't have done it better without trying, we have developed the best incumbency protection system around. That is, one, it is very, very expensive to run for a county commission seat. Secondly, a few years ago, if you remember, as Mr. Brickman referred to, we actually scaled back the amount of money that you can raise per contribution from $500 back to $250. And so it's very, very expensive to run countywide. What we've done is we've created a system in which we've choked off competition, because if you want to run for office in Alachua County, you have to spend all of your time running around the county collecting money instead of actually being in your district and listening to voters. We've taken the grassroots right out of elections, and we've made it all about money. We have actually made it about special interest money, and this is a problem with our elections in Alachua County. Single-member districts is one way. It's one way to take the money back out and make it about the relationship between the person that's running for office and the voters in the district. So there is some examples of how it is broken, and money in elections is one of them. So I would encourage you to move it forward. Again, let the voters have their say. Let the voters have this public debate. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming tonight, Mr. Jones. Susan Baird. You finally made it to the podium.
Thank you. My name is Susan Baird, and I really do appreciate everybody, and it is a very difficult position. And I think no matter which way we go, it's going to be up to all of the citizens to make sure that whatever methodology we use to elect people, that we all get involved anyway. So I think that should just be the bottom line overall. But needless to say, as we went through all of these items, I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory, especially the part about representation, is that is what we want. We want true representation. And again, that would be for the single-member district, and why the importance of having that on the ballot. And to reiterate, seeing how many people are for and against, it just obviously goes to show that something needs to be put on the ballot so that the rest of the people can go ahead and make a wise decision on this. But I think that's almost even very difficult as well. I went ahead and did my little public polling, because I think we had a pretty heated debate last time about what people said about single-member district versus at-large. Well, I asked a wide range of folks, and they were very well-educated, attorneys, professionals. When I said, would you prefer single-member district voting or at-large? They looked at me with this blank stare, had no clue what I was talking about. And I think that's part of the problem, is that it's become so complex that we really need to educate people. But part of this, all of this, is to put it on the ballot so we can start educating ourselves on all of this. Because I think that's one of the things that these types of boards really bring out, is to be able to be educated. I had no idea what charter was. I had no idea what nothing. And at least now I know some. And I think that having this discussion for the November ballot would be a very, very important thing to get people more involved. And that brings me to the other conclusion about number 4, about the charter. I had no idea about that either. But now I do have an opinion, so I'll express it now. I think it would be a very good idea to have a system where we can go ahead and have our own rules put in place so that we can best run our own areas as effectively as possible. And I think this charter, the move from the county commissioners to the charter commissioners is probably the best way to go ahead and do that. And as far as nonpartisan, again, I love that phrase. I don't care if you have a D, you have an R, you have an I at the end of your name. Whatever the issues are more important than what your political, philosophical, because those lines are just crossing very much so lately with so many issues at hand. It really needs to be the nonpartisan, and for specific views, it's so important. And it's just so expensive to go ahead and, anyway, so with all that in mind, I know you're going to make the best decisions, appreciate all the thought, all the time, all the attention, and hopefully you'll go ahead and do something that will be best for the county. Thank you so much.
We appreciate your comments so much. Ken Cornell. Ken? That's it. Welcome. Good to have you back again.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ken Cornell. I spoke at the last meeting and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again, and certainly don't anticipate any clapping. Tonight I'd like to talk to you about just one issue, and that's single-member districts. I've discussed this issue with many of you, and I stated last week I'm opposed to the concept of single-member districts for one simple reason, and that reason is the risk of the unintended consequences. I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept of single-member districts, and I've heard arguments of proponents for this proposal, the cost of campaigns, they give accountability to representation, et cetera, et cetera. As I stated last week, I've never had any problem, ever, reaching any of our 5 commissioners. If you have a phone or you can get downtown, you can talk to all 5 of them. And I appreciate that, and I think that gives me as much representation as possible. I think the risk of unintended consequences from changing the game while still developing the rules far outweighs the potential benefits. This is what I think gets lost to the voters, and I'd like to try to make an analogy. I think it's like playing a football game, because, hey, we all like to play football. Everybody wants to play football. And, hey, let's just ask the voters, do you guys want to play football? And then once we draw the vote and we all get to play football, we still have to make the rules. And that's the problem, is that we haven't drawn the line, so we don't really know the rules that we're going to be playing. But what happens is the voters, they come back and they say, well, this isn't what I voted for. This looks a lot more like rugby. It's not football. And I've got a certain opinion about the British right now. And so I really don't want to play rugby. I want to play football. Okay, and I think that's where it gets lost. So I'd ask you to consider and think through the risk of the unintended consequences of doing single-member districts. I think it sounds really, really good. I think it does. But I think that without knowing how the game's going to be played, I think it could potentially be a political disaster. And as another member said earlier today, I would hate for you guys to be an architect of that disaster. Thank you all for all of your time that you've given and for this process. My good buddies out here absolutely, totally disagree with what I'm going to say, and so we've had some real dialogue, and I think that's great. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. I have exhausted all the speaker cards that I had. Are there any speakers that didn't get a card filled out or wish to speak at this time? Yes, sir. Please come forward and introduce yourself, if you will.
My name's John Dumoulin.
Just speak right into the microphone there, Mr. Doolin.
Over here.
Thank you, sir.
John Dumoulin. I would like to say a word against nonpartisan elections because, and the basic reason is that I fear that it would lead to a great deal more money in politics, because each candidate would have to build up from scratch or on the basis of publicity acquired through one means or another, his candidacy, his opportunity, his occasions for putting his or her point of view across to the public. Whereas if he works within an organization which is formally constituted as a political party or of some other nature, he has an already constituted network that he or she is working to develop, to convince, and to bring a larger body of opinion forward at the time the contest begins. Thank you.
Mr. Dumoulin, could I get you, since I didn't have a card, would you just spell your last name for me, sir?
D-U-M-O-U-L-I-N. OULIN.
I am. Thank you, sir. We appreciate so much your comments. Anyone else wish to speak tonight? Yes, sir. Please come forward and introduce yourself.
Bill Stone, long-term resident of Alachua County.
Welcome, Mr. Stone.
Mr. Brinkman.
Mr. Stone, if I could just get you to address me, it works better if you just talk
Okay.
straight to me. Okay.
Well, there was a comment a while ago about a crowd or audience. We're not a crowd or audience. We are citizens of this county, this state, and this United States. To call us a crowd is demeaning. Okay. Repeating, let us decide by putting this on the ballot. Another thing is to please give us definitions of what this is in print so that the people can read it and understand it. I live on the Alachua-Gilchrist County line, on the wrong side. I pay a lot more taxes than they do over in Gilchrist County. I get no services, virtually no services, from Alachua County. I had a problem, and I called for the police to come out, and a long time later, a state trooper came out. I've had a problem with my heart, and the Newberry Fire Department, Emergency Rescue, they came out, but nothing else. You say, oh, yeah, you had two things. Well, I've been living here for a long time. I am pro-term, excuse me, limitations and nonpartisan. Let us have the right to make the decision about what's going to happen here. We're not stupid, and we want to be informed. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate it, Mr. Stone.
That was you and the other guy that said, this guy over here said it too.
What, is it Mr. Stone?
Yes.
When you said definitions, what did you mean? You give us definition, and I just wanted to get a
I
clarification.
don't know that I said definitely.
Okay.
I said, we're not a crowd or an audience.
I think at the end of your remarks.
Yeah.
For people to read.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm with you.
I'm not a public speaker.
We appreciate
Sorry,
that.
sir.
They surely do.
Not what we feel, but what we think. We need education. The print definitions of these questions.
Right.
Make them in plain English so we can understand them. Now, you can't do that in 75 words or less.
Okay.
So we need something prior to going to the voting polls to understand what's going on in there. Would appreciate having that. Thank you very much.
Appreciate those comments and appreciate that very much. Any other speakers wish to come forward before we move on here? Yes, sir. If in a few minutes, his question, just for those listening, said, speak again. In a few minutes, we're going to move on to the next portion of the proceedings tonight, which will be taking up any new business as well as beginning to consider whether or not we actually want to put any of these on the ballot. We won't consider everything tonight, most likely, at least particularly one, single-member districts, so we have a presentation coming up on June 23rd on that. But on any of those questions, once a motion is properly made and discussion has started, at some point in time we'll recognize anybody from the audience that wishes to speak. Right, no, yeah. We'll be bringing those up shortly, though. Okay? All right. Mr. Grundy. Okay? We have been here for 2.5 hours, and so what I'd like to do is take just a moment, if we do nothing more than just stand up for a minute and let everybody stretch for just a second, and I'm going to walk over to the podium. We'll just say 3 or 4 minutes here, and so we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back with you.
That's one way to put it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we can begin to take our seats again. We thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks so much, Ron. We could have the members take their place again. We'll get started. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We thank you all for working with us there and appreciate you doing that. Before we close the public hearing, then, I was told I missed one of the hands that went up from Derek Helmick. So, Derek, if you want to speak to us, we're glad to have you. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a Gainesville resident for the past 4 years and a student at the University of Florida. I'd like to speak on 3 issues: the structural change, nonpartisan elections, and the single-member districts. Considering the structural change, it seems that we as a county have, or at least the people putting forth this proposal, have decided that they don't like the laws that representatives have duly enacted. And so we're going to do a name change to, while technically legally appropriate, violate the spirit of the laws that were properly passed by representatives. A minority of counties have chosen to do this. I don't think that should prompt our county or this board to consider allowing something like that to happen. Partisan elections. Is our system deficient? 80% of our county is registered to a political party. Those dissatisfied can run without affiliation. Primaries have served us well since the time of Jefferson, and from the local to the federal level. Primaries have served the ability to let voters have another chance to voice what's important to them, to help decide issues, and further clarify what an election will be about in the fall. It's further taxes, growth management, education, environmental policies. These are the staples of local government, and these are the staples of party politics. Voters are not unclear, and I've never heard an argument saying that they're confused on these issues or the parties. Why would we change them if the system hasn't been deficient so far? Lastly, single-member districts. In the last county election, precinct by precinct, the population of a precinct in relation to the county almost by the precinct matched its proportion of the vote in the countywide elections. Countywide issues need countywide accountability. Further charged again with tax, environmental, and growth management policies. These are issues that one commissioner should not just be involved with a small geographic location. These need collaboration. They don't need divisiveness. And changing this to only needing to represent a small portion of the population will change it from commissioners concerned with countywide issues to commissioners concerned simply with bringing home what little bacon they can to their district. Lastly, we need your judgment and your deference on any proposal you might consider unwise or not properly fit for this county. I don't think you are appointed to this board to be a rubber stamp for any issues that have come before, for the issues brought before you. And I especially would hope that you would very much take that into consideration when discussing any issue that limits a voter's right to be heard either in a primary election or to have accountability. To change it from 5 to 1, I would just strongly urge that you consider that before you're putting it on the ballot. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming by. I'm sorry we missed you a while ago. Did I miss anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak to this? And Paula Delaney. Commissioner Delaney, welcome. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Paula Delaney. I'm currently a sitting county commissioner, and I'm former city commissioner of Gainesville and former mayor of Gainesville. And yes, someone did observe that it does seem that the city of Gainesville staged a coup d'etat at some point in the past at the county commission, because we do in fact have 3 former mayors. So that is a true statement. I just wanted to comment that what we do in local government is not really very exciting or very sexy. We basically take care of infrastructure. And I always say that it really boils down to what service do we provide, what level, who pays, who receives, and who delivers. And really our responsibility is to maintain our public institutions. The county commission is charged with, as an arm of the state, with taking care of the court system, the courthouses, and helping to fund the public defender, the state attorney, all those kind of folks. So we really have a huge burden of responsibility that is part of the states, not just what we do here at the local level. I also like to point out that building public infrastructure is like buying your kids' shoes. It doesn't matter if you built a road or a building. At some point in the future, you're going to outgrow it or you're going to outgrow it or you're going to wear it out. And either way, you have to keep making investments in these things. Those are the kind of things we do at the county commission. I guess my concern as I look around my state is I don't really see any courage or leadership. I don't see anybody walking around talking about taking my state from worst to first. I don't see anyone talking about the kind of public investments we're going to need to become first rate and first quality, whether it's transportation, education. And you can't tell me you can't run a business, you can't run a club, you can't run a church, you can't run a government if you don't invest in your people, if you don't invest in your infrastructure, and if you don't invest in your technology, because all of these things are important. And I will tell you that there's a lot of people in our county that, for whatever reason, don't pay their share of their cost of the expenses. It's because a lot of people have exemptions for whatever reason. We have elderly people, we have poor people, we have all kinds of reasons. But every time one person doesn't pay their share of their cost, that means somebody else does. All we do is shift that. I happen to be a big taxpayer. I'm happy to know that I help pay the bills for people in my community who can't afford to pay their own bills. I know I probably don't reflect the general public in that area. The other thing we do a lot is we struggle with fairness on these types of issues. And so I guess the last thing I would say is there's been a lot of interest over the years of the city and county consolidating, and I've never really been in favor of that because I've always believed in strong cities, and I believe that you should annex around a city and bring the energy and money in rather than continue to shift the Gainesville tax base out, because really, if you think about it, if you didn't have Gainesville's tax base, if every city had their own school, what would the schools look like? We know because we take the city of Gainesville tax base and share it, that it raises the quality of life and the standard for all citizens. So be cautious as you're trying maybe to have the city of Gainesville have less impact, because remember, it is the city of Gainesville tax base in the urban area that's paying the bills.
I've waited a long time to say.
I know. And last, I just want to mention regionalism.
For years.
Regionalism. I know I should know better. Regionalism. It looks like we're trying to chop things up and not go to kind of a more global and regional. And I do think that's important when you're responsible for the county. And part of what we deal with is systems versus segments. And I see where you're going with single member in particular. It seems to me into more segments. And single member probably is a good idea until you have a strip joint or the waste dump coming to your neighborhood soon. Thank you.
Okay. We appreciate your comments there. Mr. Grundy?
Commissioner Delaney, if you don't mind, well, since we have you here, I had a few questions for you, if you don't mind. If you'd indulge me for a minute. Since we have you here as a city county commissioner, you've heard some of the citizen comments and concerns. Some of them have been the issue of services if you live in the outlying areas, that they're not being represented by the, you obviously can't speak for your colleagues, but you as a city and county commissioner, these are things that are disconcerting to a lot of us that sit up here. So for you as a city and county commissioner, you've heard that they don't have services, they're not being represented, nobody comes to see us. When you get elected, you don't come see us. They don't have accountability. There's gerrymandering. What say you to some of those? Can you opine on some of those?
Well, I can tell you that one of the things I've done as an elected official here is I've tried to visit our departments. I get out. I was just this week, rode all the way up to Brooker and back on some of our roads in that part of the county because they're falling apart, and we are making funding decisions about these things. I think most of the commissioners go out and ride around areas. If we're making decisions, we've been out there, we've looked at it on the ground, we go to meetings in all the cities. And I would like to put into the record also that in 2008, the voter turnout was slightly over 80%. In 2004, it was slightly over, it was about 78%. And in 2002 and 2006, it was like 48 and 56. So, you know, you get a way better turnover at the presidential. So it's really a shame that these sorts of issues also won't go on the ballot at the presidential when you really do have, 30% more people show up to vote.
Now, also, you've also been a mayor of Gainesville. There's been some talk, I guess, in a single-member district that increases voter turnout. What do you say to that?
I would say that probably when the election is and whether the president's running influences voter turnout. If you look at the city, they frequently have very low voter turnout. If you don't have an at-large on the race, it even gets slimmer. And I do think there's value in. I know people complain about the length of the ballot, but when there's lots of things on the ballot, more people will show up. If you have like when the city has charter amendments on their ballot, they tend to have a higher turnout. So I think it's just the general interest of the population. My experience has been if people are not unhappy, you have low voter turnout. If they're unhappy, they're there to explain it to you. And by the way, I have served with term limits. I've served nonpartisan. And I've also been rudely kicked out of office by my citizens when they had had enough of me when I hadn't hit my term limit yet. So.
And my last question is going to be this: is as a county commissioner right now, where we can vote on all 5. If you were in a position now where you were in a single-member district right now, you'd obviously be concerning yourself with that of the district, but you'd also be voting on issues that affect the entire county. What do you say would be most important to you if you were in a single-member district, that of the concerns of your district or the entire county as a whole?
Well, I think you would certainly be concerned about your district, and I would like to point out that the Baseball Nations Park is going into my district, for the record, in case anybody's interested in listening. But I don't know. It's very sobering to sit in a public hearing and know that everybody in the room can vote for you. I'll just say that. And I can tell you at the city, we got into places, we had some issues with adult entertainment. And in fact, a lot of the people in the audience couldn't vote for all the commissioners, and I think that at that point in time, they probably would have liked to have had that impact and influence.
Okay. We thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming tonight. All right, have I missed anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Please come up and introduce yourself to us.
My name is Ann Stone, and I would like to make one comment. It's interesting that those who do not want single district seats don't want to let anybody vote on it. Those that do want single district seats are willing to let everyone have their say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stone, for your comments. Anyone else before we close the public hearing tonight? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Welcome back. If you just introduce yourself to us again, right there. We remember you from last time, but speak right to us.
All right, Ozzy Angulo, and I apologize. I wish I was here a little bit earlier, but I do have comments over a couple of these things. I just think that single-member districts and nonpartisan, I question the the motive behind certain people that want these to get onto the ballot in November. But I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to give my opinion as far as single-member districts and being nonpartisan. From my the little experience that I have, first of all, there's no such thing as nonpartisan. Everybody wants to know where you stand, okay? And even those that are pushing for it, and certain candidates that just ran a nonpartisan elections in the city, they know that there's no such thing. And single voting districts, well, I ran in an at-large race, and now I'm running in a single voting district race. And I actually enjoyed the fact that as a candidate for an at-large race, I had to pound the pavement and get to know every single issue. And now, as a candidate for running in a single district, I'm still doing that, because if I get elected, I get to vote in issues of the entire city. So I think, in a sense, limiting it to just being able to vote for one candidate and one member, it hinders the ability to get to know the real issues that concern your municipality. And this isn't supposed to be easy. Being a candidate is not supposed to be easy. Getting elected is not supposed to be easy. It's meant to be difficult and challenging. Because if you can make it all the way to the end, then maybe you are the right person for the job. And people want to know where you stand. And you have to have the courage to admit and defend where you stand. Anything other than that, I think, is irresponsible. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming down tonight. I appreciate sharing that experience with us. Anyone else tonight on our public hearing then? Last call. All right. Well, thank you so much. At this time, then, I'll close the public hearing. As a segue to our next business, I want to take just a couple of moments of personal privilege and walk over to the other podium for just a second.